extreme fragmentation.
Di far nascere un'alleanza educativa per formare persone mature capaci di vivere nella società e per la società. Un proverbio africano recita che per educare un bambino serve un intero villaggio. Ma dobbiamo costruire questo villaggio tutti insieme per educare i bambini, per educare il futuro. Dobbiamo fare in modo che in questo villaggio nasca una convergenza globale per un'alleanza tra gli abitanti della terra e la casa comune, affinché l'educazione sia creatrice di pace, di giustizia, sia accoglienza tra tutti i popoli della famiglia umana, nonché di dialogo tra le loro religioni. Dobbiamo avere il coraggio di formare persone disponibili a mettersi al servizio della comunità. Serve un patto educativo globale che ci educhi alla solidarietà universale, a un nuovo umanesimo.
Benvenuti, ben trovati.
Welcome.
Questo applauso vi giunge dall'aula magna della
This is the applause you're hearing
Università Lateranense.
from the Lateran University. My name is Alessandro Grisolti, and I will have the pleasure of accompanying you in this event, an event promoted by Pope Francis.
Ascolteremo un importante videomessaggio.
And we'll be soon hearing a video message from the Holy Father summarizing what he proposed on the theme of education.
Avrebbe dovuto tenersi il 14 maggio scorso, ma ovviamente
The Global Compact on Education was supposed to be held on the 14th of May,
non lo ha permesso.
but of course the pandemic didn't allow for that to happen.
Le condizioni lo renderanno possibile. Di oggi questo evento invece è una tappa intermedia che però vuole sottolineare quanto sia urgente il tema dell'educazione, forse, anzi sicuramente ancora più urgente di quanto potesse esserlo prima della pandemia. Questo evento vuole indicare la cura, l'attenzione che il Santo Padre ha per la questione educativa, una questione educativa, una questione che riguarda
Much care the Holy Father has towards education, and it has to do with everybody, men and women, brothers and sisters, to go back to the encyclical's topic, Brothers All. And therefore this message on education today gives it more strength indeed. Many today, as we all know, would have wanted to be here, but in compliance with the anti-COVID rules, we wanted to give space to the protagonists of this pact, young people, students, educators, teachers. At the same time, we wanted everybody to be able to attend this event, even at a distance, and therefore this event is being streamed on Vatican News, its portal, and the YouTube channels with simultaneous interpretation into English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. This event is also available live through the Vatican Media satellite broadcasting. Now, before we listen to the words of the Pope, this new video message on education, I'd like to ask our host to join us on stage, the rector of the Lateran Pontifical University, Professor Vincenzo Buonuomo. And I wish to thank the Grand Chancellor of the Lateran University, Cardinal Angelo De Donatis, and all of the authorities present. You have the floor, Professor Buonuomo.
Il benvenuto dell'Università del Papa, quindi è
Thank you. Welcome from the Pope's University. It is being given through myself as the rector and the Grand Chancellor who are present. A year ago, on the 31st of October 2019, the Holy Father from this very same hall launched the idea of promoting a global compact on education. And some of his remarks led to the beginning of a further debate by universities and academic centers as a way of promoting and programming the pact itself. I think that there's a phrase that can welcome us, and I quote the Pope: "Without a project on education, the human person is a mere slave of a limited thought, a fragmented thought, a thought which can only offer small things, not major projects." That's why we came up with the idea of the Global Compact. And on that occasion, the Pope mentioned 4 fundamental pillars: the development of this idea, the idea of a dialogue, which has a cost, the idea of certainty, the certainty of education, and of the various educational agencies that can promote education itself. He also mentioned the unity of education through a number of different tools to come up with the idea of the community, the communitas, which includes educators, those who are educated, and all of the protagonists of the experience that education is. That is our university's welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you to the Rector of the Lateran University. And now the moment we've been waiting for. Pope Francis goes back to talking on the theme of education, which is core world. Let's hear it together. Dear brothers and sisters, when I invited you to begin this process of preparation, consultation, and planning for a global pact on education, we could never have imagined the situation that would have developed in the meantime. COVID has accelerated and magnified many of the issues and needs that we had identified, and it has also uncovered several others as well. Concerns about healthcare are now accompanied by economic and social concerns. Educational systems worldwide have felt the effects of the pandemic on all levels, at schools and in universities.
Le quali hanno mostrato non solo una marcata disparità delle opportunità educative e tecnologiche, ma anche
educational and technological opportunities, but they have also made us realize that due to the lockdown and many other already existing needs, large numbers of children and adolescents have fallen behind in the natural process of schooling. Recent statistics from international agencies have led some to speak of an educational catastrophe. Perhaps somewhat hastily, but that is what is being referred to, an educational catastrophe. As much as some 10 million children are forced to leave school as a result of the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus. This has only increased an already alarming educational gap, with over 250 million children in the age bracket, which includes children going to school, who are now excluded from all educational activities. And faced with this dramatic situation, we know that the necessary healthcare measures will prove inadequate unless accompanied by a new cultural model. We have now become more aware of the need to change our model of development so that we can ensure that the dignity of the human person is respected and protected. And development ought to start from the opportunity that global interdependence offers to communities and peoples to care for our common home and to foster peace. We are experiencing a comprehensive crisis that cannot be reduced or limited to any single sector or context. It is a comprehensive crisis. The pandemic has led us to realize that what is really in crisis is our way of understanding reality and of relating to one another. And in this context, it's obvious that Neither simplistic solutions nor wishful thinking will do. Education, as well, is meant to be transformative. To educate is to take a risk and to hope to the present, a hope that can shatter the determinism and fatalism that the selfishness of the strong, the conformism of the weak, and the ideology of the utopians would convince us is the only way forward. To educate is always an act of hope, one that calls for cooperation in turning a barren and paralyzing indifference into another way of thinking, one that recognizes our interdependence. If our educational systems are presently marked by a mindset of replacement and repetition and are incapable of opening up new horizons in which hospitality, intergenerational solidarity, and the value of transcendence can give birth to a new culture, would this not signify that we are failing to take advantage of the opportunity offered by this historic moment? We also know that the journey of life calls for hope, hope grounded in solidarity. All change requires a process of education in order to create new paradigms capable of responding to the challenges and problems of the contemporary world, of understanding and finding solutions to the needs of every generation, and in this way contributing to the flourishing of humanity, both now and in the future. We consider education to be one of the most effective ways of making our world and history more human. Education is above all a matter of love and responsibility, handed down from one generation other. As such, education is a natural antidote to the individualistic culture, which at times degenerates into a true cult of the self and the primacy of indifference. Our future cannot be one of division, impoverishment of thought, imagination, attentiveness, dialogue, and mutual understanding. That cannot be our future. Today there is a need for a renewed commitment to an education that engages society at every level. Let us heed the plea of the young, which opens our eyes to both the urgent need and the exciting opportunity of a renewed kind of education that is not tempted to look the other way, and thus favoring grave social injustices, violations of rights, terrible forms of poverty, and the waste of human lives. What is called for is an integral process that responds to those situations of loneliness and uncertainty about the future that affect young people and generate depression, addiction, aggressiveness, verbal hatred, and bullying. This entails a shared journey that is not indifferent to the scourge of violence, the abuse of minors, the phenomenon of child marriage and child soldiers, the tragedy of children sold into slavery, to say nothing of the sufferings endured by our planet as a result of a senseless and heartless exploitation that has led to a serious environmental and climatic crisis. There are certain moments in history in which it is necessary to make radical decisions that can not only shape our future and our way of life, but above all, it can shape our stance in the face of possible future scenarios. And amid the present health crisis and the poverty and confusion it has caused, we believe this is the time to undersign a global compact on education for and with future generations. This calls for a commitment on the part of families, communities, schools and universities, institutions, religions, governments, and all of mankind in training mature men and women. Today we are called to have the necessary parousia, to leave behind superficial approaches to education and the many shortcuts associated with utility, with standardized test results, functionality and bureaucracy, which confuse education with instruction and end up atomizing our cultures. Instead, we should aim to impart an integral, participatory, and polyhedral culture. We need the courage to generate processes that consciously work to overcome the existing fragmentation and the conflicts that we all bring with us. We need the courage to renew the fabric of relationships for the sake of a humanity capable of speaking the language of fraternity. The value of our educational practices will be measured not simply by the results of standardized tests, but by the ability to affect the heart of society and to help give birth to a new culture. A different world is possible, and we are called upon to learn how to build it. This will involve every aspect of our humanity, both as individuals and as communities. Let us appeal in particular to men and women of culture, science, and sports, artists, and media professionals in every part of the world. We ask them to join in supporting this compact and promoting by their testimony and by their efforts the values of care for others, peace, justice, goodness, beauty, acceptance, and fraternity. We should not expect everything from those who govern us, for that would be childish. We have the space we need for co-responsibility in creating and putting into place new processes and changes. Let us take an active part in renewing and supporting our troubled societies. Today we have a great opportunity to express our sense of fraternity, to be good Samaritans who bear the pain of other people's troubles rather than fomenting greater hatred and resentment. This calls for a pluralistic and multifaceted process in which all of us can work to provide meaningful responses, in which diversity and methods are harmonized in the pursuit of the common good. The ability to create harmony, that is what we need today. For these reasons, we commit ourselves personally and together to make human persons in their value and dignity the center of every educational program, both formal and informal, in order to foster their distinctiveness, beauty, and uniqueness, and at the same time their capacity for relationship with others and with the world around them, while at the same time teaching them to reject lifestyles that encourage the spread of the throwaway culture. Secondly, to listen to the voices of children and young people, to whom we pass on values and knowledge in order to build together a future of justice and peace and a dignified life for every person. Thirdly, to encourage the full participation of girls and young women in education. Fourthly, to see in the family the first and essential place of education. Fifth, to educate and to be educated of the need for acceptance, and in particular, openness to the most vulnerable and marginalized. Sixth, to be committed to finding new ways of understanding the economy, to understand politics, to understand growth and progress, so that they can truly serve humanity and the entire human family within the context of an integral ecology. Seventh, to safeguard and cultivate our common home, protecting it from the exploitation of its resources, and to adopt a more sober lifestyle, marked by the use of renewable energy sources and respect for the natural and human environment in accordance with the principles of subsidiarity, solidarity, and a circular economy.
Cari fratelli e sorelle,
Dear brothers and sisters, we want to commit ourselves courageously to developing an educational plan within our respective countries, investing our best energies, and introducing creative and transformative processes in cooperation with civil society. In this process, our point of reference should be the social doctrine, which is inspired by the revealed Word of God in Christian humanism. It provides a solid basis and a vital resource for discerning the paths to follow in the present emergency. The goal of this educational investment, grounded in a network of human and open relationships, is to ensure that everyone has access to quality education, one in line with the dignity of the human person and our common vocation to fraternity. It is time to look to the future with courage and hope. May we be supported by the conviction that education bears within itself a seed of hope, the hope of peace and justice, the hope of beauty and goodness, the hope of social harmony. Let us remember, brothers and sisters, that great changes are not produced from behind desks or in offices. No. There is an architecture of peace to which various institutions and individuals in society contribute, each according to its own area of expertise, without excluding anyone. This is how we must move forward, all of us together, each as we are, but always looking ahead, together to the building of a civilization of harmony and unity, in which there will be no room for the terrible pandemic of the throwaway culture. Thank you. As the Pope said in this video message, education is above all a matter of love and responsibility. Education disseminates hope, but it also has a lot to do with fraternity. And Pope Francis mentioned his encyclical Fratelli Tutti a number of times. He shows that in education and fraternity, we have the pillars and the ways to overcome this terrible pandemic. These are some of the topics we'll be discussing today with our guests, who are Cardinal Giuseppe Versaldi, who I'd like to ask to join me on stage for an initial comment to Pope Francis's world. Cardinal Versaldi is a prefect of the Congregation for Catholic Education. And then Monsignor Vincenzo Zani, who is Secretary of the Congregation for Catholic Education. We've already seen him in the initial welcome address. Professor Vincenzo Bonomo, who is Rector of the Pontifical Lateran University, hosting us today. Professor Franco Anelli, Rector of the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart. And Professor Silvia Cataldi, who is a professor of sociology at La Sapienza University in Rome. And then from our audience, we'll be hearing from other professors and students who I will be introducing as we go ahead. But now, let's hear an initial comment to Pope Francis's words by Cardinal Versaldi. First of all, what I want to mention in Pope Francis's stimulating message is the historical framework he refers to when referring to the event he had announced last May. No one, of course, could have foreseen the impact of the pandemic. And the Pope says that this tragic event, the pandemic, was a factor which sped up a crisis that the Pope was already aware of, and for which he had already decided to propose this compact in education. Of course, the pandemic made things worse, and the remedies which were rightfully found in the field of education through the social media, for instance, as the Pope said, allowed some to overcome the obstacle, although they did cause greater throwaway of young men and women, children, who joined the ranks of those who were already excluded from the school system. 250 million. A further 10 million were added to those numbers, according to the statistics the Pope mentioned. A further 10 million brought about by the recent pandemic. That's why the Pope says it is all the more necessary to promote the global compact in education. And the motivation which lies at the origin of the Pope's initiative, even before the pandemic, is the need to bring about a change in our development model. According to the Pope, we cannot continue to repeat the same processes of development in all fields, including in education, despite all the shortcomings we're aware of. And to change the model of development, according to the Pope, we need to have a new cultural model. Because working and acting has to follow our thoughts. If we don't change our thoughts, if we don't change the way in which we see the world, if we don't change our approach to reaching our goals, we cannot change our development model. We can search for remedies, but that would end up changing everything without changing anything at all. That's why, according to the Pope, the new cultural process starts from education. because it's difficult to change the mentality of the older generations. And that's why we have to focus on the newer ones. We have to change the way in which young people think, so that, as the Pope says, we can break that chain of events and pessimism, which are the result of ideologies which oppose the true good for humanity. That's why the Pope wishes to launch this initiative. Given the fact that the crisis is global, we need to have a global pact to harmonize, and he repeated the word harmony a number of times. We have to harmonize all of our efforts to go in the same direction, because of course we all agree with the goals. Nobody explicitly says that they want inequalities, injustice, or war, but we have to agree on the means to achieve that goal. The Pope says we also have to be on the same page when it comes to the underlying motivation that can lead to this change in our cultural model and in our development model. According to the Pope, and he mentions a Christian tradition, education, he says, is a matter of love. A love which makes us brothers and sisters, knowing that we are connected to one another, that no one can be alone by him or herself. We have to consider humanity, and all the agencies interested in education have to converge. They have to make sure their efforts on the means, the goals, and motivations converge. That's why the Pope says we have to have a pact for and with the new generations. We have to involve young people not as an object, but as the subject of this change. And then we have to involve families, schools, universities, governments, religions, all of humanity, with our respective roles. No one can be passive when facing this tragedy that the pandemic has only sped up. That's why, according to the Pope, we have the need to rebuild a fabric of fraternal relations. This, of course, is a topic which is linked to the recent encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, in which the topic of fraternity has its origins in the Christian human vision regarding the human family. Creating fraternal bonds allows us to create an alliance through which we can achieve the same goals with the same means. And finally, among the 7 proposals made by the Pope at the end of his speech, I want to focus on the core importance he gives to the dignity of the person, all persons, which has a value in and of itself, regardless of any other explanation. The human being exists with rights and dignity, regardless of one's condition, without any discrimination. And I'd also like to underline, among his many proposals, the role he mentions that the family has as the very start of education. If love is the foundation of education, it is also true that if we don't learn in the family, it is difficult to learn to love outside of it. That's why respect for the family as the first and foremost agency of education, fostering the family, strengthening the family, is also something that can bring about change in society. It can bring about a cultural change and a change in our development model. And I'll conclude by sharing the Pope's plea on how important it is to foster the Church's social doctrine. And since we're in a university, since it is one of the tasks that the Congregation for Catholic Education has, we have to make sure that this doesn't remain a mere slogan. We have to promote the Church's social doctrine. and it has to be developed through this new contribution. And I'd like to ask all academia to stimulate scientists and scholars, because as the Pope said in Veritatis Gaudium, the Constitution for ecclesiastical faculties, so that our institutions can process projects and ideas, so that we can educate people who can have an impact on society. That is our commitment as a congregation, as a way of responding to the Pope's stimulating message. Thank you. Thank you, Your Eminence. Thank you, Cardinal Versaldi. Let's stay with the Congregation for Catholic University and its commitment to promote the Pact on Education. Monsignor Zani, you were involved in this Global Compact on Education from the very beginning. What kind of project are we seeing, even in the words of the Pope that we just heard? Pope Francis outlined a number of aspects and principles, but at the same time, here and there we can see some ideas. I think an element which summarizes his previous messages too is present in the second goal that the Pope mentioned, when he says that first of all we have to listen to the voice of children and young people. We have to transmit values and knowledge, first values and then knowledge. We have to build together a future of justice and peace, because education is a seed of hope, which is something he repeated often. And then we have to make the life of every person worthy. Today's event is a stage and a very long process. September last year was when we launched the initiative. Which elements were already discussed in depth before today's event? Well, since September 2019, the Congregation for Catholic Education, which was given the task of preparing this event, which then wasn't held. The congregation has promoted a series of actions, a series of international conferences, the goal of which was to study the various aspects of the Global Pact on Education. This was done together with universities, academies, and study centers, as we mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. And in various countries we organized conferences, initiatives, programs, and projects, which we will be collecting and then disseminating. And the aspects which emerge from these conferences are the topics of democracy, peace, ecology, intergenerational dialogue, interreligious dialogue, the topic of service learning, namely educating by making sure that people serve the common good in others. And then a very important theme, of course, goes back to the document signed on February 4th, 2019 in Abu Dhabi, between Pope Francis and Al-Azhar, to organize a study seminar in Dubai where this topic will be further developed, especially after the Fratelli Tutti encyclical. Monsignor Zani, you'd mentioned what was already done. Which are the new elements included in today's video message delivered by Pope Francis? Well, in the first part of his message, I think we see two new things vis-a-vis the thoughts that the Pope has mentioned a number of times already, namely the fact that we are experiencing a context which is marked dramatically by the pandemic. And the Pope mentioned a number of figures, and he also said that this is a catastrophe as far as education is concerned. And then he also refers to the Fratelli Tutti encyclical. Each phrase in the message goes back to various parts of the encyclical. And this very recent encyclical, I think, can become a roadmap for the principles that have to inspire us in the future. And now all of our institutions have to start working immensely. We have to start thinking as to how we can invest our best energies as a way of transforming the reality of both people and society. Thank you, Monsignor Zani. Let's move to the audience. The Pope said that the new generations are the very first recipients of the pattern education. And among the young people present today, we have Hiro Tanaka. We are interested in your opinion on the compact and what the Pope said, because your point of view is an original one. You come from Japan and you are Buddhist. You have the floor. As a Buddhist engaged in the dialogue between religions, I am especially encouraged by the Pope's invitation for a common commitment towards education and on building a civilization of harmony and unity. The pattern education, in order to respond to the urgent challenges of young people, societies, and the common home, and we are all called upon to generate harmony, to generate an alliance between people and institutions. This will require listening among generations and also among all members of society. In my personal experience of living and studying together with my Christian and Muslim brothers and sisters, I have experienced that unity in diversity is a call to our being in a relationship. I believe that if we can be more transparent, if we can be available for one another, I think that together we can grow more. This is a communal path towards an integral and fraternal culture of unity. Thank you. Thank you, Hiro. Thank you for having mentioned fraternity. The global compact on education is global because it is a global response to a global need, as mentioned by the Pope and as mentioned by the Director General of UNESCO, Audrey Azoulay, who wanted to be present here today and to join the challenge launched by Pope Francis with an important video message. Let's listen to it together. Your Holiness Pope Francis, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to His Holiness Pope Francis for his commitment in building peace through education and for his confidence in the role that UNESCO can play in this mission. In our organization, we share the vision of a humanist education based on dignity and human rights, peace and citizenship, ecology, solidarity, and development. Education, in fact, cannot be limited to its economic or utilitarian functions. Education is a common good that allows us to revive among all a worldwide aspiration to fraternity, as His Holiness affirms in his most recent encyclical. This is the condition for a society in solidarity that respects the human person's dignity, but also the planet, which is our common home. Ladies and gentlemen, this common good, however, is in danger because, as His Holiness recalled last February, the educational pact could have been broken as a result of inequality and injustice. The crisis we are facing today is a plural one. First of all, It is an unprecedented crisis of education, since about 1.6 billion students in the world have been deprived of their classrooms. This has highlighted and accentuated a whole series of inequalities, especially social inequalities. In fact, 40% of the less advantaged countries have not been able to put in place the specific devices for the continuity of learning. As we all know, this difficult situation affects the most vulnerable, especially, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where over 80% of students do not have access to internet in their homes. This crisis, however, is broader and deeper. It has triggered a globalization of indifference, sometimes violence, hate speech against the most vulnerable, migrants, and discriminated populations, and very often women. What the COVID crisis seems to have confirmed in revealing the fragility of our educational systems as well as the fragility of our societies is the need for new planning and new commitment of all of society for education. A pact desired by His Holiness, who considers education in all of its global, shared, and integral scope. UNESCO, the leading organization of the United Nations for Education, has a vocation of being at the heart of this refoundation and all of the fullness of its mandate, through education, of course, but also through culture, sports, science, and information. UNESCO, in fact, by its very nature, is a world organization which brings together 193 member states from all continents. UNESCO sees education as a shared and integral vision, focusing on the human being, empathy, dignity, to make education the pillar of the refoundation of our societies. The World Pact thus echoes the grammar, the DNA of UNESCO, its historical and humanist ambition to build peace, first and foremost in our minds.
UNESCO works to realize this ambition on a daily basis. Firstly, we're taking urgent action in response to the crisis through our Global Education Coalition, a coalition that brings together more than 150 partners active over in 70 countries, a coalition which is working to support the continuity of learning whenever and wherever it can. We're also focusing on the medium and long term through our commitment to global citizenship education. This involves learning how to respect others, to respect their difference, to fight prejudices, and to raise awareness of our common humanity. It is, for instance, in Mosul, where we're implementing one of our most symbolic projects in this field, where we are supporting the rehabilitation of schools, the recovery also of cultural life, bookstores, festivals, educational events, all of which are essential pillars for a culture of peace and respect. This culture of respect must not only apply to others, it must also apply to the natural world. It is why UNESCO is increasingly engaged in environmental education, which will allow us to repair another compact, the compact between humans and nature. To rebuild these foundations, we need a forward-looking, long-term vision. This is why we've launched international reflections on the futures of education with the support of actors and civil society around the world. By involving the entire learning community, we will be able to shape education as a global common good for 2050 and beyond. And indeed, this is what we owe to our young people. In this respect, it is symbolic that our International Commission on the Futures of Education is led by Her Excellency the President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia. In this country, which is home to 100 million people and faces many environmental challenges as well, young people account for 60% of the population. UNESCO is therefore delighted to be with you, to be part of this education compact, because its goals reflect our own. We also aim to build a world based on fairness, solidarity, dignity, through international cooperation and education, by revealing our shared humanity. In this way, we will be able to prepare the next generations to face the future and, in the words of His Holiness, sail the high seas of the world. I thank you for your attention.
We wish to thank the Director General of UNESCO for having joined us this way, for having joined us in this event to launch the Global Compact on Education. Pope Francis has said and written many times, even in Fratelli Tutti, that education and fraternity are values to be shared by all religions. From the audience, we have Mohammed Amin Shanoui, a student, a Muslim from Algeria. How do these Pope words resound in you? Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be with you. 800 years ago, a Muslim wise man said something very beautiful, Jalaluddin Rumi. He said, yesterday I was intelligent, so I wanted to change the world. But today I am wise, so I changed myself. And I think that all of us have to have the courage and the vision to change things. But before that, we need to work on ourselves. That is what Pope Francis was saying in his speech, a speech to all of mankind. He asked humanity to listen to our inner voice and to have the courage of saying and changing things. The word hope is a word that I found striking because, to me, hope is made for great things, although it isn't enough because you really need to have the mind to dream. You need the heart to be able to hope and to pray. And we need our hands to work in a concrete way. I believe that if you want to be great, you must serve others without using them. As a Muslim, and my name is Mohammed Amin, I am very glad to have read the encyclical, and I was impressed by the thoughts which were so beautiful and so tangible, so concrete, that are both said and written. And it touched me when Pope Francis gave us a very strong advice to those of us who are young. He asked us to be aware of our history, of our identity, and to be aware of our diversity, so that we can achieve this common goal, which is universal brotherhood, a pillar that can allow us to build this path forward. And that's what God, Allah Almighty, says in the Quran, verse 13 in Al-Jurat. He says, oh, and I quote, "O men, we have created you from a man and a woman, and we have made you peoples and tribes, so that you may know one another." This is a very strong message, I think. And I'm very happy to be able to study here, to learn. I think that we all have the power to serve humanity. Because, in my opinion, he who does not live to serve does not serve to live. Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed Amin. Professor Silvia Cataldi. We heard Akito and now Mohammed Amin. We're seeing very different opinions today. And we know how fond the Pope is of the polyedric image. The Pope often uses the metaphor of the polyhedron. What does he imagine when he speaks of an integral, participatory, and multifaceted culture? Well, first of all, the Pope asks us to refer to an integral culture. And I'm speaking as a university professor, first of all. This is a very strong shift in our mentality. Typically, even without being aware of it, our idea of culture is based on notions. A major educator in our age, Paulo Freire, spoke of depository education. In other words, we educators, without even thinking of it, see our students as if they were containers to be filled. But this kind of a model must change, because it has two problems, at least. On the one hand, it is an abstract form of knowledge which is detached from life, and we're seeing this in our universities too. And on the other, it also implies a hierarchical vision of knowledge. It makes a distinction between those who know and those who do not. And I think that this pact will work only if we educators, we teachers, and I'm speaking as a mother too, we have to go back to the original meaning of culture, which comes from the word to cultivate in Latin. It is a sedentary verb. It means we have to invest our time and space. We have to give space to questions without merely providing answers. And cultivating also means caring and loving, as the Holy Father says in the pact. That's a very strong notion. And when it comes to loving, we're not only referring to one's mind, but also one's heart. And love also has a very practical dimension, which is essential. If we educators, if we teachers and professors can bring about this change, we will be doing our job, because education is a way of curing. And Anne Arendt said that daily care is a revolutionary gesture. She said that education is the moment that decides whether or not we love the world enough, because it leads to transformation. How can fraternity or brotherhood, which is mentioned so many times, how can that have an impact on education and society to the point of changing them? Well, in fact, I've asked myself, what can this pact be? Can it be a mere slogan? I think we have to use two things. First of all, we have to recognize diversity and plurality. And the second aspect we have to take into account is inequality. Every crisis, I think, requires a new form of solidarity. And this pact refers to fraternity, which of course has its roots in the past. It is the missed promise of modernity, as the Pope himself says. But on the other hand, it also refers to a new form of fraternity, one based in the present. Alain Caillé, a French sociologist, says that fraternity is plural. It can only be fraternity between a single social class, or within a single nation, between those who are similar. It cannot be only male. It has to be plural because, as the pact says, it recognizes the specificity, beauty, and uniqueness of everybody. And the other very strong idea, which I'm interested in as a sociologist, is the fact that the pact refuses neutrality. It is on the side of those who are the last. It looks to the world, beginning with those who are the last, those who are left behind. And it's an element of action, because it tells us everything. In the second part, it refers to the protection of minors, young women, those who are weak, the disabled, the oppressed, those who are in prison. Thank you, Professor Cataldi. Let's go back to our audience. After Japan and Algeria, let us give the floor to someone from Congo, Brazzaville in Africa. Let's give the floor to Sister Rita Bedestelle, Mosunda Kimani. Sister Rita, this educational pact, these words we listen to, what do they inspire in you? Are they a plea? Well, to me, this pact on education is both an appeal and an invitation. It is an appeal because it brings into play the principle of humanity and the logic of love, but it is also an invitation because it is open to everyone, regardless of our race, regardless of our color of skin. It is a way of countering all forms of egotism that pose an obstacle to the progress of mankind and the integral education of the human person. Only by sowing the seeds of humanity and love in the small garden of the human heart, only by doing so will we be able to understand that the future of a new and radiant world depends on the quality of the education given to young people today. But it also refers to the attention which we have to give to the weakest. And I do hope that we can have the maximum level of participation in this global pact, because hope never disappoints, as the Pope says. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Rita. Thank you for these words of hope. In the video message, the Pope said that education is hope. Let's move on to Scholas Occurrentes, which is an experience which was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, thanks to Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, who was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires at the time, during the crisis in Argentina. Then over the years, Scholas has become a pontifical foundation, and it is committed with all of its efforts and with all of its creativity to promote the compact in education. Let's listen to the message sent by the president of Scholas Occurrentes, José María Corral.
Bienvenidos a este día tan
Welcome to this very special day.
Un día que celebramos para nosotros de
Today is a day that we at Scholas celebrate the origin of the mission for which we were born 30 years ago. As Pope Francis said, Scholas was born to reconstitute the educational pact that even then Father Jorge Bergoglio believed was broken. It was broken because young people were alone, because education had lost its essence. It had lost its harmony, the meaning that young people need. An education that had little to do with the lives of young people. It was an education that increased the number of those who were excluded. It increased the gap. That's why Scholas was born by bringing together young Jews, Muslims, Christians, public and private school children, so that together they could be a part of the same classroom, a classroom without walls. And later, Pope Francis realized that the crisis that Argentina was experiencing was present everywhere in the world. So he asked Scholas to bring this experience, this educational revolution, to the rest of the world. And in 190 countries, Scholas promotes a meaningful education. It implements the educational pact to daily life on a daily basis. That is why we would like to thank all of those who have worked over the years to transform the path in education into something tangible, beginning with the real problems that our young people have. Because as the Pope says, there will be no future if we do not consider our young people in the present. We wish to thank José María del Corral, president of Scholas Occurrentes, Professor Franconelli, a rector of the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart. What is the role universities can have in renewing our commitment towards education? Well, I think they can find this role if they consider the meaning of the words which define it. Universitas means having a broad approach, a complete approach to education from two different points of view, two dimensions. One is that we have to look to the completion of the education of the people we refer to. The second dimension is the dissemination of the proposal of education. And vis-a-vis the education catastrophe the Holy Father was mentioning, maybe universities aren't in the front line because the catastrophe has been affecting, for the most part, primary schools. But of course, all students have to be able to complete their studies. And going back to what Professor Cataldi was saying, and I share her views, the Universitas approach can be achieved if we respond to the needs of current societies. And societies need culture, as we were saying. They need to have a broadly disseminated culture without excluding any groups. There needs to be an approach which is aware of the role of citizenship, the role every person has within society. For far too long, universities were simply focused on offering professional training. I think they have to go back to the cultural, general, global dimension, which is a part of their origins. Thank you, Mr. Rector. In the audience, we also have Professor Alberto Lopresti, who teaches history of political doctrines at LUMSA University. The Pope said that to educate a child, we need a village, but that village has to be built. The reality is superior to reality. Going back to Evangelii Gaudium. The university has collected dozens of stories and tangible experiences from this point of view. LUMSA University, for years now, has been focusing on the pedagogical thought of the Holy Father. Now, given these experiences you have, how can we make sure that the pact doesn't remain a mere theory? Well, we understand that the compact in education wasn't born today. It has a long history, and we have to remember the many meetings the Holy Father had with the world's major leaders, in which he asked them to do something tangible for education and to reduce differences and the gaps between generations, to heal the many sufferings which exist. The point is that its credibility also lies in the fact that we already have plenty of initiatives that the Church has been working on worldwide to promote education in the service of the person. That's why the origins of the Pact for Education lie not just in a proposal and on principles. It lies in the fact that the Church can offer its experience and its initiatives, which are significant to the entire world. And of course, we require global answers to global questions. And these lie not just in ideals, but also in a number of initiatives that we are proud of and that we can explain. And what goals, what developments can this project you've been working on have? Well, in a nutshell, we have to organize. The Global Compact on Education isn't just a plea to do more, it is also a plea to do better. But we also need to create a network. That is how we can truly reach the next level. We need to create networks to exchange information, to coordinate, to come up with the resources, so that through solidarity, we can move forward together towards the same goals that the Pact on Education has. And I'd like to mention the fact that there are initiatives that can go hand in hand with the Global Compact on Education. They can be qualified from this point of view so that they can become active members of the Compact on Education. And that's why the Congregation for Catholic Education, together with a number of academic research centers, wishes to create an observatory that can measure and assess and promote those initiatives which are in line with the Compact on Education, so that we can offer a global response in line with the criteria of Catholic education. Now let's look at an initiative that you have worked on in Cambodia with the Salesians. My name is Sakeng. I am 20 years old. I come from the Karakakawa village. That's where I used to live with my mother, my father, and my two younger brothers. My parents are farmers. My father passed away. My mother worked constantly. She worked very hard. She was the only one who would take care of all of us in the family. And I would often help her because I was the oldest. It was my duty. That's why I could never play with my friends. In the beginning, very early, before going to school, I worked with her in the garden. After work, I went home, I washed, and then went to school. Sometimes I didn't even have time to work or to eat. My classmates saw that I was poor and they often excluded me. I envied their clean clothes. I felt I was different, and I tried as much as I could to give myself strength. The children and the families who live on the landfill which serves many cities, and these are children who, with their families, collect plastic and cans and things which can be recycled, sometimes even food. Another children you have to consider are those who work on the border between Thailand and Cambodia. That is the black hole of Cambodia, so to speak, where children are exploited for transportation. They're also exploited for organ transplants, and then we have newborn babies who are sold by their families to people who promise it will bring them to wealthy families, whereas they are simply exploited. In cities like Pattaya, where you have sex tourism. Tourism in Cambodia is a two-faced coin. We have the place of exploitation and pedophiles, but also those who make it and who can overcome poverty and suffering. The Don Bosco Hotel School offers this possibility to young people. It allows the dreams of the young men and women who wish to build a better future to come true. When I came for the entrance test, I was scared. When I found out I had been admitted, I was very happy because I was going to be included in the School of Cooking. When I began school, all the teachers took me to visit the various classrooms, and when I entered the kitchen, I was extremely happy. When I can, I want to open a restaurant. I want to have a beautiful home that I can share with my family. I want to offer a better life to the future generations. I want to create an atmosphere of love and caring, which is what the Don Bosco community gives the young people who don't have very many possibilities. This is an initiative which also makes us understand the tangible things that the Compact in Education can do. Let's move back to the audience with Maria Cinque, who is director of the A School at LUMSA University. She is also the protagonist of this research that Professor Lopresti mentioned. What inspires the stories you collected? Well, the stories are inspired by the Compact in Education and the Global Village. These are initiatives which are happening in various parts of the world, both in formal and informal education. And these are initiatives which are fostered by volunteers, by NGOs, by university institutions, by religious families, congregations, and movements. The things they have in common are elements of education which tend to favor inclusion and integration. They're focused on solidarity, of integral ecology, citizenship, and peace. These experiences always imply an alliance, a pact between those who offer the service, local players, generations, cultures, and religions. How do you teach solidarity to children? How do you teach fraternity? Well, in Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis says that solidarity is based on service. He says that from early childhood we can teach to take care of those who are most fragile in our families and society, amongst the people. At LUMSA University, we have created the EIS School, Education for Encounter and Solidarity, the goal of which is to educate university students to serve for the common good. It's also a way of training professors and teachers so that they can teach children to serve from the very early childhood. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, LUMSA University, for having collected these experiences. Let's move on to another important part of this event and of the Pact on Education. Monsignor Vincenzo Zaini, there are a number of initiatives which you already mentioned. We saw some videos, and as far as the future is concerned, how can we make sure that this very ambitious and challenging project can become something tangible? And the Pope says we are asked that it turns into long-term planning. Well, this organization work began with a message on September the 12th, 2019, when Pope Francis said that we have to commit so that we can put the person at the center, so that we can promote tangible, effective, and far-sighted projects, so that we can also integrate people that can work for the common good. Now, to promote these concrete and coordinated projects by involving a number of different academic and institutional realities, well, we chose 4 different working areas. The first refers to human dignity and rights. The second area refers to peace and citizenship. The third refers to integral ecology, and the fourth refers to fraternity and development. For each of these areas, we chose 4 universities that can guide networks of universities, not just Catholic and ecclesial universities, but also ones which belong to other religious realities, such as Buddhist and Muslim ones, for instance. And they will be working on promoting research and suggesting projects and in sharing information. These are 4 universities. For human rights, we have Notre Dame University in the United States. For peace and citizenship, we have this university, because the Pope asked us to work on peace processes. For integral ecology, we have the Javeriana University in Bogota, Colombia. They've been working for 5 years now on education for a common home. And then for fraternity development, we have the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart. Now, since we have 2 rectors who are leaders in these areas, we have the Pontifical Lateran University, which will be focusing on peace and citizenship, as Monsignor Rizzani was saying. And in 2018, if I remember correctly, a course on studies for peace was set up in 2018. Professor Bonomo. Now we have something more. This is a process which is up and running. It is a process which is up and running because it is one which has been able to build the architecture of peace. In the Fratelli Tutti encyclical number 231, we refer to the architects of peace. Every brother and sister can build this architecture by taking into account 3 elements. The foundation, first of all. The foundation doesn't mean that we have to exclude war. It also means identifying those situations that can exclude conflict. Not just rights and freedoms which have been proclaimed. It also is a way of explaining what rights and freedom mean. The concept of citizenship is important. For centuries, citizenship was used as a way of excluding or including, whereas in this day and age, citizenship has a different meaning in a context of peace. The second profile is the working method, and the working method that we began as a university which identifies with a message which wishes to promote the global compact in education. We chose the method of dialogue. We want to have a dual approach to relationships that can allow us to identify the best possible working method that can create values and not just a way of expressing notions. The third element is the goal we have, the goal of peace, which can solve conflicts and prevent them as well. We want to train professional profiles that contribute to this. Therefore, we have to bring together theology, philosophy, law, economy, social sciences, and it is an ambitious project, of course, but when it comes to education, I think it is a profile that can summarize things a great deal. And of course, along with teaching, we need to promote research. And research has two profiles we need to consider. First of all, we have to broaden what the church can do, the outgoing church towards the world, the field hospital, which was mentioned a number of times in Evangelii Gaudium. And then another aspect is the life of the international community, the life of international institutions, a concept of peace that defends multilateralism vis-a-vis isolationism. And then this research activity can bridge the scientific approach with a practical one. It's ambitious, of course, but it is something which can be broadened and achieved by working with other universities, with other ideas and other contributions. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for having referred to multilateralism, which was mentioned in Pope Francis's message to the UN a few weeks ago. Another area, of course, refers to dignity and human rights, as Monsignor Zani was mentioning, and this will be discussed in a video message by Professor Diane Desierto of Notre Dame University in the United States.
The University of Notre Dame is proud to support the Global Compact on Education. My name is Professor Diane Desierto. I teach Human Rights Law and Global Affairs at the Keough School of Global Affairs. Here at Notre Dame, we integrate human rights teaching, research, and service at all levels of students and all departments, and in particular, even all fields of endeavor in research. Human rights education is central to our Catholic mission as a university, and all the more so for our personal institutional motto to be a force for the common good. So here at Notre Dame, we have offered the fullest range of courses on civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the draft convention on the right to development at the United Nations, which was drafted but with my supervision as well as with the participation of Notre Dame undergraduate and graduate students. We offer the fullest range of courses in an interdisciplinary human rights space, particularly on human rights reparations, economic, social, cultural rights, human rights sustainability in the global commons, foundations of human rights, among others. But learning human rights is not limited to the classroom. At the earliest possible opportunity, through centers such as the Clough Center for Civil and Human Rights and the Kellogg Institute of International Studies, which hosts the Ford Program for Human Development and Solidarity, we afford opportunities for students to immerse immediately in learning in the field of human rights in accompaniment with those who are the most vulnerable, local communities, grassroots communities, social movements, among others. We teach human rights over here not from the standpoint of states and the multilateral institutions whose reform and design processes and institutions we critique and also scrutinize, but most importantly from the standpoint of the most vulnerable whose human rights are on the line. This is why we are proud from the Keough School of Global Affairs to advance the mission of integral human development, to reach for, in the words of the Catholic Church in Populorum Progressio, in Solicitudes Res Sociales, in Laudato Si, and most recently Fratelli Tutti, to look and search for the development, the genuine development of the whole person and of every person. We congratulate the Global Compact on Education.
We
wish to thank Professor Desierto for this message from Notre Dame University. And we can continue to talk about the elements included in the Global Compact on Education. Back to Italy now, to the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Milan, which will be focusing on another fundamental theme of the pontificate and of the message, namely fraternity and development. Professor Franconelli, the rector, tell us about the work your university will be doing on this theme. Well, thank you. The educational dimension linked to fraternity and development is something which gives us a great deal of responsibility. It is one of the most important elements linked to education that the Pope referred to. For quite some time now, our university has created structures that can focus on multi- or transdisciplinary approaches. We have a Center for International Solidarity, and we have the Center for the Social Doctrine of the Church. These are the two dimensions which have to be considered. These centers aren't focused on one single research element. They are structures that can bring together a mix of skills from professors from different departments. They're focused on research or missions that have a multi-dimensional approach so that they can understand the complexity of the world around us. Which of course isn't linked to specific sectors. University professors tend to see things from a single dimension, but the world is quite different. Then of course we have the School for the Environment, then we have the UNESCO Chair on Education for the Integral Development of the Person and Solidarity Development of Peoples. This is headed by Professor Domenico Simeone, who will be leading the observatory on education for international cooperation. It'll be a tool allowing us to have a dialogue with the other universities involved in this project. We tried to come up with a synthesis within our structure. And for years now, we have been trying to allow various structures to cooperate on a number of different topics that our university is interested in. And at the same time, I think our main effort will be that of trying to create an effective form of cooperation between our university and all of the others participating in the project. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Anelli. You mentioned the School for the Environment. And the final area we wish to focus on is integral ecology. Let's move to Colombia, Bogota. And we'll be listening to a message from the rector of the Pontifical Lateran University, Father Jorge Pérez Piedrahita. A warm greeting to all educators. COVID-19 reminds us of how fragile we are. It has brought politicians, entrepreneurs, and scientists to their knees. And it has laid bare the cruel inequalities of society and the extent of the social and environmental crisis. Therefore, we need a radical change through an educational path that will bring about a new universal solidarity and a more welcoming society. Holy Father, with the Global Compact on Education, you ask us to be bold, to break paradigms which are obsolete. You ask us to seek a world culture, one which is participatory and multifaceted. You ask us to show horizons of hope. So, with enthusiasm, we share your ideas and we commit ourselves to you. The Faculty of Economics of our universities have a serious obligation to propose a model for sustainable development because the current model has led to the plundering of creation. This vision of integral ecology has to be transversal in all curricula. It's important for our students to understand that everything is connected with everything else. The Laudato Si encyclical gives us a number of elements to promote ethical education in universities. And for the responsible use of science and technology at the service of human dignity. They outline the guidelines of an ethics of care, the care for oneself, the care for others, the care for the common home. The encyclical guides us on the practice that students must carry out during their educational process. This practice must put them in touch with the pain, with the cries of the poor and of the earth. Thank you, Pope Francis. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this global compact in education. The Pontifical Lateran University will take up the path of integral ecology, as we've been doing for the past 5 years. We wish to thank the rector of the Xaverian University in Bogota, Colombia. They will have to work on the topic of integral ecology. We're moving on to the conclusion of today's event. Monsignor Zani, from Rector Zanelli and Bonomo, and from these video messages, we heard how important these areas will be. And for those who wish to join the compact to give it more strength, which, as the Pope says, will have to bring about change worldwide. What can we do? Well, personalities from all over the world were invited to the event on May the 14th, representatives of institutions, Nobel laureates, representatives of the field of education, the world of academia, culture, the arts, the sports, and religious leaders had been invited. And the Holy Father had asked all these leaders to sign the pact as a way of showing their support for this proposal. It was a symbolic way of saying, here we are, we share these ideas. And today we heard that universities are already working. We already received a great deal of support. But in view of the event we will be holding in presence, which has been postponed to as soon as the conditions will be there, we are collecting all ideas, all proposals, all of your support. We will be collecting all those who wish to support the initiative, and then we will be disseminating the list. That's why we have an email address that you can write to. Secretary at Education.Globalcompact.org. We have already received a number of comments and communications, and we'll be waiting to collect them all before we share the list with all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Monsignor Zani, for this final and very tangible plea to support this compact in education. We have reached the end of this event, but of course it is an end which will then lead to a new beginning. And as the Holy Father mentioned, from this very title, we wanted to relaunch the Global Compact in Education, an alliance for the future of the new generations that can bring together all people of goodwill. I wish to thank the Congregation for Catholic Education for having organized the event. I wish to thank the Pontifical Lateran University and Rector Bonomo for having hosted this event. All of our speakers, the authorities present, and I wish to thank all those who participated in so many ways, all those who are connected through technology. We were able to stream this event and to be together despite being distant. And let us close this event by listening once again to the Pope's plea. These are 7 very concrete and clear things. This is a commitment that we are called upon to share. Thank you.
L'educazione è soprattutto una questione di amore.
Education is a matter of love and responsibility, which can be transmitted over time from one generation to the other.
Riteniamo che sia questo il tempo di sottoscrivere
This is the time
un patto educativo globale.
to sign a global compact in education. We are personally committed to put at the core of every formal and informal education process the person, by refusing those lifestyles which favor the dissemination of the culture of discarding. Secondly, to listen to the voices of children and young people, to whom we pass on values and knowledge, in order to build together a future of justice, peace, and a dignified life for every person. Thirdly, to encourage the full participation of girls and young women in education. Fourthly, to see in the family the first and essential place of education. Fifth, to educate and be educated on the need for acceptance, and in particular openness to the most vulnerable and marginalized. Sixth, to be committed to finding new ways of understanding the economy, of understanding politics, so that they can truly stand at the service of the human person and the entire human family within the context of an integral ecology. Seventh, to safeguard and cultivate our common home. That's how we have to continue, together, each of us as we are. But we have to look together to the future to build a civilization of harmony, of unity, in which there is no room for this terrible pandemic of the throwaway culture.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. You're rich in love and You're slow to anger. Your name is great